Yeah, this is really annoying with Discord. I mean, with Twitter Spaces just randomly not working. That's so annoying,
Thanks, Elon.
bro. For real. Why is it broken? I mean, it's already terrible on a day-to-day basis, and now it just doesn't work all of a sudden.
I know it's like a bug fix where you break everything instead of fix it. It's like, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but hey, at least it worked.
Yeah, now I feel bad because everyone has to like come into here.
Yeah, I think it
No
had
one's
like
gonna know.
I know. I think the space had probably what like 100 people that had set reminders.
Yeah, 101 people.
Yeah, 103 now. Dang. Well, hopefully people see it. Not sure what else we can really do.
Yeah, that's too bad. So who's psyched about Edge Wallet? Oof. And not Edge Wallet. Well, I'm also psyched about Edge Wallet. But Trust Wallet. Oh my God, dude, Trust Wallet, amazing.
It's here. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, when was that first rumored? Like well over a year ago, right?
I think there's been like on and off discussions for probably about a year. Is kind of how this whole thing happened, and I mean they have like a pretty like solid business, and they have a lot of different things that they're doing for their users, obviously. So I think the way it kind of goes, like they're like, oh yeah, we're definitely interested, and then some time goes by, and then some more time goes by, and then follow up. It just takes a while to get this stuff like off the ground, especially with such a big team like they have. So it's amazing to finally like see it going and then see all the swaps come through. I mean that with just a couple days of data here, like they're doing pretty nice for the week, even though it's really only been live for I think 2 full days now, the 14th and the 15th.
Do you have the stats in front of you? You want to read off anything?
What's up, guys?
Hey,
Hey,
yo,
what's up?
Eridanus.
Yeah, speaking of which, I'm like writing their weekly report right now. I do have the stats in front of me. So this week, 336 swaps came through Trust Wallet. They had a refund percentage of 2.3%, which is really good. Giving them some recommendations on how they can lower that further. They did 200K USD in volume, which puts them at the fourth largest affiliate. THORSwap is the largest affiliate, then Thor Wallet, then Shapeshift, and then Trust Wallet at this point. So pretty solid. I mean, we've been tracking their swaps throughout the week, and basically the only education they've done is that one tweet, and also users need to physically update their app to access these swaps. And this is only Android, so they have a whole, millions of other users that are on iOS. So we definitely expect this volume to continue to uptick as more users download the app, as they release it to iOS, and as they kind of roll out some more educational content for their users. And as people get familiar with that these kind of cross-chain routes are now available, we expect more users to keep coming back, and so we expect this volume to exponentially increase over the next few months.
Absolutely, yeah. For it to be that strong, just in the first 2-3 days with just Android, not everyone updated, no iOS, limited education. I mean, that's a really strong signal that it's gonna ramp up quite exponentially once all those things play out. So that's strong.
Yep. Yeah, it's been great, and I just love like watching their swaps come through. We had a 2 Bitcoin ETH swap this morning. We had the 13 ETH swap a couple days ago. Those are the meaty swaps that we want. So
Just about to call that out. 2 Bitcoin swap this morning, really juicy.
that's quite juicy. Yeah. I'm actually going to run the numbers on what the liquidity fee was at for that. Let me pull that one up.
It's like 130 rune or something like that. I checked it earlier. Don't worry.
Nice.
Yeah, but really, so are you saying that Trust Wallet is now the fourth biggest in total affiliate volume.
Correct. Yep. So there are 10 active affiliates currently. And yeah, Trust Wallet is already the fourth largest. I mean, THORSwap, kind of blows everyone away. They're doing 4.8 million in USD volume weekly on average, at this point. Thor Wallet's doing 350,000 USD. Shapeshift is doing 260,000, and Trust Wallet 200,000 this past week. And we're starting to track percent of THORChain volume that comes from affiliates. So basically, it's like affiliates or R bots. Right now, we're at 7.8%, which is relatively low. And like kind of one of our KPIs is to basically increase that percentage as much as possible, just so that more of the volume on THORChain is actual users and not R bots. But what is interesting is that 23% of liquidity fees, basically 23% of yield that's going to the LPs, is from affiliates and not R bots, which is pretty solid. And so again, those are the two pretty important KPIs. If we can get 200% of swap fees coming from affiliates, then as block rewards continue to decrease, yield will not be impacted, and the reserve will have a constant kind of revenue stream. So that's kind of what our long-term goal is.
And that's before iOS is even released for Trust Wallet, and before anyone really even knows that THORChain is in there. Like, as you said, they only did very small amount of promotion, and we're already seeing this, pretty good volume. It's decent volume for sure, and there's swaps coming in every couple of minutes, basically. So I mean, that's looking super positive right there, and it sends a signal to a lot of the rest of the industry. I think just showing how reliable THORChain is, and then that it is reliable infrastructure there to use and have power the swap. So like, not only is this reached a huge amount of users, but it just puts THORChain in that context of like, hey, this is the industry swap provider, right? And it'll just make it easier to do future integrations, and especially once it gets to iOS and this like it proliferates more, people become more used to the flow of swapping. It's really smooth swapping in Trust Wallet. They really nailed down the user experience. So it's like long time coming, but you guys did it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I'm so bullish on just trust UI UX understanding. I mean, I think that's such a key reason why they've got the market share that they do. And now, like, even releasing the browser extension, hopefully we see more chains added on that side, and even swap functionality there too. I'm sure that's pretty likely, but even their extension, it just comes out day one, polished, things work well. Clearly they know what they're doing, and that's actually still kind of rare when it comes to UI UX in this industry, so it makes me really excited.
Yeah, one of the smart things I think Trust Wallet did was so first off, they do have BUSD as a swap option, obviously through THORChain, but the other swap routes like BTC to ETH, for example, you don't actually see a dollar quote anywhere in there. Like, you don't see that you're putting in $17,000 worth of Bitcoin and getting out 16.9 of ETH. It's just a conversion rate, basically. Like, they don't they kind of abstract all that away from the users and just make it just the simplest swap flow possible, which is like to me that seems really positive, because especially when it's not because they're just doing it in the amounts that you're actually swapping it in. So you're abstracting away the dollar amounts from it, which I think is the right way to do a swap. That's what every other swap platform does, right? It's not like, oh, this is how much fees are being charged. All fees are just abstracted away into the exchange rate on most of these exchanges, which is kind of the way that Trust Wallet presents the trade to the user, which I think is it just prompts more people to swap and just say like, yeah, this is the exchange rate for Bitcoin to ETH, because it really is the only swap route. So that's the way that people are going to end up taking. rather
That's a
than be
really
like,
good
oh,
point.
I'm losing a couple dollars of value here swapping, so maybe I'll just stick with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Instead of breaking down every fee, all slippage, all that, just saying like, hey, here's the rate. It actually makes me think of like, just like using Coinbase or something, like what most normies are used to. It's like if you go to sell some Bitcoin, it's just like, well, you're going to get 16,500, and it's like, wait, the price just said 16,900. Like what's happening? It doesn't actually break down that fee. It's just like it just presents it. Here's the rate. So that's kind of seems similar to just like abstract all that away.
That's interesting. I didn't actually notice that. That's a good point, though. Yeah, and the other thing that makes me bullish on Trust Wallet volume is, now that the discussion of adding BNB chain is kind of ramping up, and we're kind of in a prime position to do that. I mean, nodes have voted that that's the next chain they want, and I would almost expect Binance BNB chain or Binance Smart Chain volume on Trust Wallet to be higher than Beacon chain volume, just because it's kind of more popular in DeFi. There's probably more activity. And so we kind of already have a built-in, volume stream for that chain, unlike, kind of like AVAX that we added, and we didn't really have that. So I think, in the early new year, if we add that, I think that's going to, be another catalyst for greater volume through Trust Wallet. And potentially I could see them rivaling THORSwap, relatively soon. So that will be great.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I don't even know where you can get BEP2 assets. I mean, maybe there's somewhere, some exchange that does it. There's no DEX that does it anymore. Now that Binance DEX is kind of out the window there. And everyone that's using Trust Wallet is using Binance Smart Chain assets. So, I mean, in my opinion, now's the time to really get that going, get the aggregator going. And then that's when you're going to see crazy amounts of volume coming through, especially Trust Wallet, but that just opens up all these other routes too that people are really trying to trade.
Aggregator,
Yeah,
you might have just dropped some alpha in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's even alpha at this point. Like we've been saying it for like 8 months now. I think maybe it is alpha to the people who just like have no idea. It's definitely not alpha to anyone in this Discord. So you guys know who you are, the aggregators out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of assume that the aggregator pattern is going to continue to proliferate. I mean, it's just kind of a no-brainer for these wallets that are already kind of interacting with the THORChain network. It's just kind of a tacking on an additional smart contract call and opens up their users to thousands and thousands of cross-chain routes that no one else has. I mean, it's just an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, and like going along with the Trust Wallet integration, like the aggregator is like ultimately like where the goal should be. Like the goal isn't just to get the major layer one swaps there. Is to make it so you can trade anything through any of these apps, Trust Wallet, Edge, THORSwap, whatever, using the aggregator, and it just routes to THORChain, routes to all the other dexes, abstracts it away from the user, and then user can just use their wallet and swap easily, not have to go to a DApp or a DEX or an aggregator or anything like that, all just taken care of for them. And that's just how simple it's going to be. That's the true evolution of the Trust Wallet integration.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm just so excited hearing that like the tune kind of changed pretty quickly around BSC with this integration, because just a week or two ago we were kind of saying like it's not really new chain time, it's going to add costs to nodes, it's unproven, and like while that makes a lot of logical sense, it was also kind of a disappointing thing to hear. And I know I'm excited, and I feel like the community is just going to be super stoked to get a high volume chain in there, and especially one that like you said already has, like, we know there's going to be volume, so it's win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the volume that will come from BNB chain will hopefully offset the additional cost of the validators. It might take a few months because we are in like a deep bear market, and that's the other thing is like, we are like in a very kind of tough spot, like economically speaking, in the space, and the THORChain volume has really held up like relatively compared to other dexes. I mean, we've seen like volume like decrease 90%, in most dexes, across the space in the last, 5 to 6 months. and THORChain actually has done relatively better than that. And so as we land these integrations at the bottom, and as like dominoes continue to fall, I mean, TrustWallet is a massive domino, and we have already our sites scoped on, the next 4 wallets that we're going after. So we get that done, we get BNB chain added, maybe we get Dash added, and we're going to be just set up like in a great position for the next uptick. So I'm just super pumped for that.
Yeah, man, I'm super pumped. We have some big conversations happening with some big wallets out there, as Eridanus knows, and I mean, there's a lot of things to feel very bullish on, and a lot of those conversations are going rather well too. So there's so much going on that I really can't even contain myself.
Yeah, it really is like integration domino season. I mean, of course, you guys at Nine Realms are working so hard on that, and I'm seeing it on the THORSwap side too with the THORSwap API. Like just the flow of how many conversations are happening these days, it's like crazy. It feels like every day or two there's another conversation opening up with a name I didn't expect to see, and yeah, I don't know, it's just so exciting.
Absolutely. And now is the time to like double down, dial in, like not get complacent. We're going to push harder than we ever have, and just land these integrations. And I'm just psyched.
One of the fascinating things we recently been seeing on the integration side is that like we've had some wallets or whatnot come up to us and say, hey, we heard of the Savers concept, like how do we integrate with Savers and offer that to our customers, our clients or whatever. And they had like, sometimes I didn't even really know that we did a cross-chain swap. They were just like, we just want to do the Savers thing.
Oh yeah, dude. Like there's like 2 camps. Like sometimes we'll have like a just kind of a fresh conversation with a wallet, and we'll naturally start with the cross-chain swaps. They're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then we'll talk about Savers and like, oh, that's cool. Like, let's do that. So there's like, it's interesting. It like literally split down the middle, like half wallets, like going after the cross-chain swaps immediately. Half of them are going after Savers immediately, which is great. We need both. We want both. So it's just amazing that like Savers really has like caught a lot of attention from these external teams, which is really cool.
Let me just say, it's so satisfying to see the product market fit of THORChain right now, and how it's really just finding its niche, like right at this very critical moment for this entire industry and asset class, basically. How like we rolled out Savers, which is just one of the most incredible products, which is really what's going to scale THORChain's TVL and the amount of Bitcoin in its pools, and then at the same time also like getting all this interest from these wallets who really want to integrate the swaps, but also Savers. Like it really is clear that there's a huge product market fit for all of these products that THORChain is offering, and just a huge demand to actually integrate them and use it as infrastructure. So it's just awesome to see like the acceptance from the industry, and other teams and apps and things like that who just want to use these services, which is why these services are being built in the first place, to eventually get to their users. So really cool to see people actually using these, and it's like Savers growing so well, but then like the business development side of everything going so well too. It's like everything just seems like it's clicking for a while.
Yeah, I think in part because a lot of the services that the network provides are all like vertically integrated with each other, that it's natural for if one wallet does Savers to start, and then it's would be kind of natural and common for them to integrate with swaps, and then maybe lending comes out and they want to offer Bitcoin loans to their users, and just it's already vertically integrated with everything else they're already doing. It doesn't seem like it's that much of a extra effort just to support lending, for example, and it just becomes like these features get pushed out from all the wallets and UIs out there and exchanges out there. It's gonna be, that's gonna make me super bullish about the product for sure.
Yeah, I remember one of you telling a story a week or two ago about talking to one of these major wallets, and they wanted Savers, and then you were like, oh, well, if you do swaps, that's going to create the yield that pays the Savers, so you might want to consider both. And like, yeah, those two together, how that clicks, and then the synergy between it, it's like you're going to see all of them probably be interested on both sides. Like, why would they not, when it's kind of like feeding off of each other. So either they're like feeding one side and then they're not taking the benefit for their users on the other side, or they're just or vice versa, right? So pretty cool.
Yeah, same thing for order books too. Like they look at access to order books as well once that is finished and shipped. All these features. Like honestly, that's the funny thing about this is like all these features we're talking about: the A&M design, the savers, the lending, synthetics, order books. Like all these things are in their own right like huge advancements in the space. Like really revolutionary concepts that provide something that nobody else has ever done before, and nobody else is even positioned to do it the way that we can. And so like just to see each one of these features come out and just push the envelope even further than we already did before, it's inspiring for sure.
I think the last thing on the trust wallet points here is just how aligned everybody is, especially just on the like BSC front. Like basically, like everyone's just so adaptable that basically as soon as like trust wallet is shipped, people are like, all right, well maybe we need everyone's like pivots on one foot at the same exact time, saying like, oh yeah, now is probably the time to start adding BSC and start capturing some TVL and volume on that side, because now we have this huge new user base basically of people who would be swapping. So that was just one other point I wanted to call out, just like how aligned and like no one said anything, but everyone just all of a sudden agreed for BSC just because it's the most obvious thing to do, and I think everyone sees that and just knows that is the right way to go. So there's like instant alignment, even though it was not like previously the number one priority. So that was just cool to see from this end.
I remember we were on like a call, like right when Trust Wallet like actually launched. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. We're watching the swaps come through, and I remember there was just like a moment where we all like, because we've just been in integrations mode, and we've also been in like kind of like hardening mode, and we're just like, okay, we after AVAX, we're gonna take a few months, get these integrations landing. And then we were just like on a call, and it was live, and we're just like, oh my god. And then we all just like, and there's like one moment we're like, oh yeah, we probably should add BSC now. We should probably shift back into new chain mode because we just have this built-in stream already. And it was just like a kind of like a 1 second shift. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it.
It's also one of the few chains that's already in their browser extension. So maybe that's something.
Yeah, it would be huge to get into that browser extension as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know or anything, but I'd be really excited to see if they kind of get like chain parity with the mobile app onto the extension, because then that's like a serious multi-chain browser extension wallet, and that'll be huge. I mean, it's already like so snappy and quick and nice to use. So personally, it would make it a lot more useful if it had Bitcoin, Rune, all that.
Yeah, and it would be, kind of a no-brainer for them as well. So I think we'll see. We'll keep pushing. I mean, and I would love to see them integrate savers as well. But this is very early on in our partnership with Trust Wallet, and I think it's going to continue to develop and only get better. So we'll keep pushing down these things.
Have we shared out the dashboard for the Trust Wallet stuff?
I don't know if we've kind of put it out publicly. I mean, it is a public Flipside dashboard that people can kind of track. THORSwap made it. I don't know what they feel about making it super public. I'm going to leave it to them to share it far and wide if they want to, but I mean, anyone could probably find it if they search through Flipside.
Yeah, I mean, it is a public website in a sense.
Yeah. So I'll just ping Mogarchy and see if he minds sharing that.
Well, I mean, from the dashboard, just to go over a little bit of the numbers, I think it's okay to do so. We've seen almost 400 swaps so far on Trust Wallet, and we've seen about $215,000 in trade volume. We're seeing a little over like $60,000 a day so far, which is kind of funny because people have to download the new version of Trust Wallet. So it's like, I think it'll take probably a month. A full month to get the full kind of swing of Trust Wallet into the THORChain fold. So we probably won't even see this number fully be what it's going to be until, a month from now. But like already we're seeing really good trade volume happening through Trust Wallet.
Yeah, and looking at the daily volume in swaps, they're already increasing every single day. So like that's a trend that's just going to continue,
Right.
and especially when they release iOS, that's going to effectively double, if not more. I think they might have more users on iOS than Android. Um, so yeah, this is just the beginning. I mean, I'm so excited to see them like cranking through like 2,000 swaps a day and just have the network just be like humming along, and man, that's going to be great.
Yeah, hopefully we get some more content and co-marketing going as well, because I mean right now I have to imagine it's just that you open the Trust Wallet app and yesterday there was not a swap button and now there is a swap button and it's just some users happen to notice that and happen to need to do a swap, but once there's kind of like that push of awareness and people realize that that's just an integral part of using Trust Wallet, then
Yeah.
that's going to be exponential as well.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think there was already a swap button because you can swap through like
Yeah, there
Binance.
was.
There
So
was, but not on every asset. Like, so if you clicked on if you clicked on ETH or something, it'd be a swap button. But then you click on BTC, and there'd just be no swap button. So now, just people,
Oh,
it's just suddenly it appeared without much, education around it. So once there's that, yeah.
I think Cal can speak more to what they plan on doing, but I've heard they're going to maybe even do like a push notification thing. I don't know, Cal, if you can share
Yeah.
any.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I totally forgot to mention that. So yeah, there's some stuff planned. We're gonna do. So we're planning a spaces with them. I think we're gonna do it in early 2023 instead. Like, there's really no reason to burn all of our like marketing powder basically in like the first week of this integration, being it's not even shipped out to iOS users. So like I think the best way to do this is kind of just space it out a little bit more and like slow burn this a little bit. So we're gonna do some Twitter spaces in probably the new year. I think we're gonna coordinate some stuff with them. We sent out a bunch of PR earlier this week. I'm sure people saw news articles, Blockworks, stuff like that about the Trust Wallet integration. Obviously, they tweeted about it already. CZ tweeted about it already, and further than that, they should be like they did announcements on their announcement channel, which is like their discourse forum, uh, their Telegram. I didn't actually check their Telegram, so I didn't see if they pushed that or not. But they should also be doing some kind of push notification / banner. Like I'm not sure the timing on all these things, but they have their own marketing stuff that they're doing, and we're definitely working with them to do as much as we can. Also, like if there's anything with like Binance Academy or any of the other educational things, we're definitely gonna collaborate with them on that. So we're definitely in touch with their like marketing staff, and we're working with them. It's just a matter of like this isn't like a hey like a time sensitive thing. Like this is a slow burn or like a ramp up, not like a drop off. What I'm saying. So it'll take a while to get the volume in there and like the education for the users, but we're definitely gonna get there. So just look out for that over the next couple months, and we'll do some spaces in 2023. We'll schedule it with everybody once we get some better visibility there.
Absolutely. There's no rush, and we just get iOS landed, and then we'll be in a prime position to really kick this volume off. So I love it. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and especially if they start integrating more features for THORChain, then that's just more continuation upon it. So like this is just like again, this is like the very 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 start of the THORChain / trust, or just like the THORChain BD plan in general, right? All these aren't like drop offs; they're ramps up, and very very long ramps up. But we'll get to where we need to be eventually.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, not the final form. I mean, only 3 chains so far even, so who knows?
Yeah, this is definitely not the final form. This is like this is like phase 1. I think we're not super saying it. All right. I think that's it on trust. Well, unless there's like people have questions about trust. But maybe we should talk a little bit about impermanent loss protection. I think now is probably the time to start to get into that and the new ADR about deprecating impermanent loss protection. So yeah, let's go into that a little bit. Yeah, Chad, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so let's give a little history first, so people have the context. So impermanent loss protection was initiated back in the single chain chaos net days, and the purpose of that was we kind of read what they were doing over at what's the name of that other DEX, Bancor. And we read about their implementation, and it sounded pretty good from our perspective, although we had a few changes. And we looked at the actual analysis of, like, if somebody is an LP for 100 days, like what is the actual IL that they experience after 100 days? And we found it to be like very, very small, generally speaking. But obviously it happens, but like it's not as big as you might think. And so we wanted to add ILP as a to remove any kind of like hesitation that people might have to add capital into the pools, because they're worried about IL and this kind of things. And so we wanted to be unique in that way and offer that protection. And it's worked very well. Like, I think all in all, we've spent like maybe 3 million or 3.5 million rune in payouts to ILP in total since the last 2 years or so, which is, a very small percentage of the reserve and of the pools. But now that we have a new way of providing liquidity to the pool that is not exposed to IL, the need for ILP is kind of changed, right? Because now you can just be a saver and not be exposed to two different assets and not have IL, and therefore, if you're a lower risk person, you don't want to deal with IL and this kind of thing, then be a saver. If you want to have a higher risk, higher reward system, then be a dual side LP and get a higher yield, right? With the IL risks. And so I think the intention is to drop ILP while grandfathering in people who are current LPs. So if you entered an LP position at the time when ILP existed, then you still have it. And then once this thing is turned off, any new people that come in, or if you add more capital to a position that you already have, that would also trigger you to not have ILP for that case. Is that a good synopsis, or does anybody want to add anything to it?
Yeah, well, with the specific change, like if this ADR is implemented, then ILP, like there's going to be a cutoff block basically of this is the last block you can enter the pools and have full impermanent loss protection, and then after that block, if you enter a new symmetric LP position, like a regular LP on THORChain, then you wouldn't receive any impermanent loss protection. But if you entered before that one particular block, which would be about 1 month after this vote would pass, so like there's plenty of time for this, and that's why this whole discussion is will be happening. I don't think it's even really started yet, but people would get a month to enter in with the current impermanent loss protection, and then after that, new LPs wouldn't get the impermanent loss protection. But if you entered before, you would still be grandfathered in for the old impermanent loss protection. So sorry, I saw Pluto jumped up, so I'm sure you can speak more on it.
No, you guys are good. I don't have anything to add right now. That's
Sweet.
a good synopsis.
Yeah, and the other thing though, which is pointed out in the ADR, is just that basically the entire IL liability is completely gone at about $6 rune, and obviously that decreases as more fees get added to the current LP position. So like this is a there is a cap on like what the liability is here. So and that's going down over time. So like the purpose of this is basically to make some kind of cutoff date, so that way the liability isn't increasing, and then just slowly that decreases over time and just gets phased out completely eventually as the IL completely disappears.
Yeah, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Some people in the community have been wanting to get rid of ILP for a long time. They just want to get rid of that liability in a sense. For me, I didn't mind it so much. I just didn't think to be that much of a threat or that much of a problem personally. But and this kind of new direction that we're heading as a protocol, in some sense of heading towards savers and heading towards away from LPs, dual side LPs as like the standard way of providing liquidity, we kind of have to rethink about how we structure some things. And so I think LP plays less of a role or less of an importance moving forward into the product's future.
So maybe one thing we should talk about is synths and LPs, because I don't think we haven't talked about that for like a long time. So maybe there's people who don't like understand the correlation between the current dual-sided LPs and synths and how that relates to savers, because they're all kind of interconnected here, and synths play a huge role on the yield of the traditional LPs who are also affected by this impermanent loss protection. So like, let's go into a little bit about the relationship there.
Yeah.
Basically the liability of synths. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you can think about it this way, that if the people provide capital into the pool and then they get, a claim on, 1 Bitcoin of purchasing power, basically. And so if after they enter the pool, if the rune price underperforms the asset, meaning the synth purchasing power becomes more powerful in a sense, or purchases more value, then that has to come from somewhere, and LPs are basically the person that comes from. If rune overperforms the asset, then the synth holder needs less value, and therefore that value goes to the LPs, right, in some sense. And so there's a kind of an exposure that dual LPs have to the rune asset, right? And where they're kind of a little more sensitive to the price movements of rune, right? It's kind of almost like being leveraged in a sense, right? And how much that leverage is relative to how much synth utilization there is in the pool at any given moment. If it's like 1 or 2% synth utilization, then the leverage is basically near zero and it has almost no mathematical effect, right? If it's at 99%, then on the opposite side of the spectrum, then obviously it's a huge leverage exposure. And if rune's performance does well against the asset, you make a lot of fucking money. And if it's the reverse direction, then you lose a lot of money, right? So it's kind of has a relationship there. With ILP though, ILP kind of played the backstop to it. So even though LPs are kind of on the hook in some sense to the synthetics, the reserve is on the hook to the LPs, right? So even if you experience a lot of losses as an LP from synthetic, assets becoming more valuable than the rune asset, the impermanent loss protection becomes kind of like the backstop in a sense to those people. So in the end, it's not even really the LPs themselves who are backing the synths, although they are in a sense. It's actually the reserve that it provides value to support it as well, right? And so removing ILP from the network means that LPs don't have that backstop anymore, right? From the reserve anymore, right? Instead, they get a different kind of backstop, and that different kind of backstop is what we call the POL, which accomplishes the same goal in many respects. So the POL, when LPs are losing value, the POL starts to add value back, and it's almost like the POL is like becoming like a bodyguard or like a shield to the LPs, like it's taking on the brunt force of these things, and so it protects the LPs in some sense or form. So ILP might be becoming disabled, but replacing that with POL kind of, in some sense, replaces ILP.
Yeah, I think you explained it really well. I actually don't think it's going to be overly controversial. That's just my take, but I think when you first kind of hear ILP is going away, you might be like, I really love that feature and it really helped me out. But I think when you understand the whole picture and why and how it's liability on the reserve, and that just leads to that just brings rune into circulation when it's actually being paid out. I think people will. I think you explained it well, and people will understand. So.
Yeah, POL is a much more elegant solution than just saying that there's insurance for LPs. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing POL roll out eventually, as the synth caps get increased and POL comes into play. The one thing I just wanted to highlight though, from what Chad was saying, was just the concept of basically synths drawing down regular LP positions, because that's like probably the most important thing to understand as an LP. Since value comes from LP units from the pools, if the value of LP units decrease because Rune decreases more than the asset, so more units need to be basically attributed to the synth holders. That's what takes away from the value of the LPs. So that's the number one thing to know as a LP on THORChain. If you're a symmetric LP, it's very important to understand like the synths relationship with LPs, because especially as the synthetic liability is changing now. It's been static for a long time, like six months now, and now that it's increasing, that changes the amount of liability that there can be on those pools, and it increases the amplitude of those movements, right? So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I have a community question that's come up a lot, maybe for Chad or Pluto. But could you address the concern of, does this make LPs no longer first class citizens, and what is a rune holder to do? Like if they're not at the level of running a node, and LPing is kind of now more reserved for POL and savers depths and synth depth, then where does like the average rune holder kind of lie as far as adding value to the protocol?
So there is a mentality that some people have, and I'm starting to come around this mentality myself, that if this network is comprised of basically just the POL and savers, and they're more or less, I mean, anybody who, being a dual side LP is still available, anybody who wants to do it, they can. It's not like that feature is just gonna be like turned off or anything like this, but if the network predominantly is just POL and savers, then it becomes a much more simple design and a much more elegant design. It becomes, we remove a lot of the complexities of being an AMM from people's mindsets, and we just provide the value of yield for people without the complexities of like IL and these kind of things. And then the question becomes like, well, can the network operate safely or scale safely with that mentality? And I think it's actually like, the answer, at least the answer for me, is absolutely yes, just because the reserve has always been the backstop to the LPs and to the pools, and it's just now it's just doing it in a more direct way rather than an indirect way of like giving money to LPs. It's just kind of giving money to the pool itself, right? So it's a much more effective or efficient way of doing it in some sense. But to answer your question about like what are rune holders to do, I mean, that's a good question. You can still be a dual-sided LP if you want to. I think I would probably do it personally, just because I'm a believer in Rune, and I think it'll perform very well through the next 2 years, and so it'll the yield that an LP would make in that scenario would be very high, just because imagine if it was like 80% synths, for example, right? The 80% of the income of the pool. 50% of that 80% is not going to them. It's going to the LPs, and the LPs only have 20% of the pool, including the POL and you. And so the yield for a dual side LP will be kind of crazy high, right? Of course, it comes with risks, which you should be aware of and take that into account. But me being a person who's a believer in Rune and thinks this can perform well, I would probably consider LPing personally in that scenario, even though there's a lot of risk to it. The upside is pretty large, right? And maybe I'm okay. I wouldn't put my entire Rune position in that, to be honest, but like maybe some smaller position or something like this.
Wait,
For
I have
other,
a question.
yeah.
Question. If you're long Rune, why would you do LP? You would just end up with less Rune if the price of Rune goes up.
Not necessarily. It depends, right? So if Rune's price goes nowhere, right, and Bitcoin's price goes down, then being a dual-sided LP, you would make a lot more money than if you had just held the Rune, right?
Right.
But because you're taking a leveraged position on Rune in this scenario, and a highly leveraged position on Rune, like if you would held all the tokens, yourself, you would have effectively like, instead of having 500 rune exposure, you'd have 1,000 because you're just holding it yourself, just buying it like you're holding. So you'd have that much exposure. But having half of it be in Bitcoin, half of it be in rune with a highly rune leveraged position, maybe it's basically like having 1,500 rune or 2,000 rune or some quantity. I don't know. I'm just making up numbers off the top of my head here. So it depends on the amount of leverage and the amount of price change that happens, in a sense.
Yeah, the way I see it is like, I used this analogy before, but like dual LPs will essentially almost become like algorithmic traders. I mean, I think we're going to see the most usage of dual LPs from bots and from highly sophisticated players who are essentially attempting to smooth out the demand for savings. So when there's high demand for savings, POL only will still drip in capital at a steady rate, and so dual LPs may come in to essentially arbitrage the demand on the savings side of things. And essentially, I don't think that many people are going to use dual LPs for like long-term just like park your investments. It should not be used for that. It should be essentially used to take advantage, or essentially like it's basically like taking a 3x leverage position on whatever way you think the market is going to move. And I think that it'll be mainly people like settling intraday. Like they might enter a dual-sided LP and then exit within like, an hour or something if they start seeing a market move. So what I really liken it to is like demand generation at like the top of the of like a power grid, right? Where you essentially have like your renewables and you have your nuclear and your forms of energy that are like either sustainable or cheap to operate, and then you have like you have types of energy that are a lot more expensive to operate, but you can sell them for a lot more because it's easy to bring them online quicker. So you can use them to like smooth out peak demand, and that's where like that's where I kind of liken like dual-sided LP is almost to like a coal power plant, right? It's not for everyone, and it's dirty in the sense that like there's a lot of risk going into it, but you have an opportunity to make a lot of money with it if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, just stick to the basics. Just be a saver, and so where I think that leaves the question, and to Chad T's question about what are you to do if you're a rune holder and you just want to basically contribute to the network somehow. I think a couple of ideas have been floated before we talk about on the security side. Chad, I know you had some ideas about whether people could participate in the protocol reserve or in protocol liquidity itself. I seem to recall you said that design might not work. So what would prevent me from depositing to the protocol reserve so that I have a stake in the protocol and liquidity? Why wouldn't that design work as a way to do like single-sided staking for Rune?
So that is possible. You could do that. From a technical perspective, there's not much reason why you couldn't accomplish that task. The question is, how does it provide value to the network, right? Because if you're providing Rune to the reserve to be used for the POL, the amount of Rune that the POL needs to deploy in any given pool is determined, right? It's determinate. And it doesn't really matter if you provide a Rune or you didn't provide Rune, the amount of Rune in the network from the POL's position is the same, right? So you providing Rune to the POL to provide capital for it to deploy doesn't actually change the amount of Rune that's being deployed into the pools, right? So you're not actually contributing to the depth of the network, depth of the pools, and so it becomes less valuable from the network's perspective of what it's trying to accomplish. But then you have the question of well, do people provide Rune to different pools so they can pick which of the POLs of which chains or which asset they want to provide Rune to, or are they just going to apply the Rune to all the different things and they get price exposure to all the different assets, right? Or do you do it kind of similar to savers and say, it's a rune on rune thing, in which case there's like now a synthetic rune in some sense, interest-bearing synthetic rune in a sense, and then that actually would probably increase risk on the protocol rather than decrease it, you know, and the question is it worth that additional risk that the protocol had to take on to accomplish that task? To me, it just feels like, I know people like the idea of, hey, I buy a token and then I stake that token or I do something with it and then I get more yield from it. And the problem with that mentality is that you cannot generate yield from within yourself, right? It's like you cannot pick yourself up by your own belt. It doesn't make any sense, right? The only way you can generate like actual yield is by providing a service that somebody else is willing to pay for and then pay fees to do so, right? Like when somebody provides staking into Atom, for example, and they put up their Atom tokens and they stake it into some validator, you are not providing a service or something valuable that anybody else gives two shits about, right? Nobody cares whether or not Chad THOReau stakes his Atom tokens into a validator set or not. You're not providing value. You're not providing service. You're not doing anything worthwhile. In which case, what that means, because nobody's providing a service that somebody else is willing to pay for, well, then how does it generate yield? Well, it steals money from everybody else. You're basically reallocating, like in a very socialistic mentality, you're reallocating value from one Atom holder and you're giving it to another Atom holder for whatever reasons or purpose. And you're basically just like cannibalizing your own community, which is just structurally, I don't personally agree with that mentality at all, right? And so in order for people to provide rune and get a yield in that rune, they have to do something that is valuable to the network that the network is willing to pay you for, right?
I also think they have to take risk too. You know what I mean? Like there is no free lunch. If you're doing anything with capital, it means you have to take a risk on it, right? You have to be willing to say, like, I'm making an investment. It's possible that I get this payout, but it's also possible that I don't. Right. And this idea that like crypto is just like an endless wellspring of money, of free money that people can, you know, and I'm speaking directly to staking, this concept of staking. I mean, I also hate it. And I think you're completely right. Like you're not providing any value by staking. So I've really appreciated that THORChain has resisted the urge to implement some kind of, you know, just like staking vault mechanism for Rune. I think that it's completely backwards to the goal we're trying to accomplish here, which is to get Rune deployed into the system in a way that helps the protocol.
Right. I mean, I'll always stay open to the idea of finding a way to use Rune to generate a yield, but the ways that I've thought about thus far are just not, you know.
So what about if there was like a protocol reserve, like front load pool, right? Where like instead of dripping, like basically if that pool is empty, then it uses the protocol reserve for POL. But if there's anything in that vault or whatever, then it uses that before it uses the protocol reserve. So people can basically say, I want to stake my Rune to go to the front of the queue to get my protocol owned liquidity, my Rune added to the POL, to the protocol owned liquidity, and then essentially that is taking a share in the overall P&L of POL.
Yeah, you can do that, but then the question becomes, like, why would the POL give space to Pluto to provide Rune when it can just do it itself with its own capital and make its own reward, right?
Well, because that, I mean, I think the idea is at some point, right, we're gonna deploy 30, 50, you know, $70 million, so 70 million Rune of 160 or maybe even 80, maybe even half the protocol reserve. I don't know, maybe didn't you guys float something as high as like 100 million for protocol for POL? Okay, so no, sorry, there like we were saying like 80 million in bond. If we were thinking about like what is the ideal you know, equilibrium of the system, someone floated some numbers.
Yeah, so that comes down to the idea of the synth caps, right? So the higher we place the synth caps, let's say we put them at like, you know, 80%, let's just say. And that means that means for every like dollar that goes into savers, we need to deploy 25 cents from the POL, right? And so we don't need 100 million. We actually can become more capital efficient. We need, you know, 20 million. right, instead of 100 million from the actual reserve, right? And it goes even higher.
I just want to point out for anyone in the audience, what you're suggesting, 85% synth cap is crazy. That is fractional reserve banking. That is saying there is not
fractional reserve banking. Come on, man.
It's
literally the opposite of, it's like you're literally the opposite of fractional reserve banking.
No, it's saying that the amount of debt that we have is not backed by one-to-one by any real assets. It's saying that for every 20 synthetic Bitcoin that are in the pool, there's only like 15 or 12 real Bitcoin.
It's the opposite. It's not the pool that's backing the synths at that point. It's the reserve. That's the reserve.
The actual L1 assets. That means there's no longer 20 Bitcoin at 50%, right? At 50% synth cap, there could be 20 Bitcoin in the pool, and there could be 20 Bitcoin worth of synthetic Bitcoin. And if all the people that went to go redeem their synth did so, then the pool would essentially not have any more L1 Bitcoin. What you're saying is that if you want to raise the synth cap to 85%, okay, I'm talking about L1, right? Not Rune, I'm saying that the amount of L1 asset that is backing the synth is less than the amount of outstanding synth. And that is just crazy to me.
That is, okay. Let me understand. Let me explain some things to you. I think you might be missing here, right? All this synthetic asset does is it makes it basically a promise that it's worth the same as like one synthetic Bitcoin is worth one real Bitcoin in purchasing power, right? It doesn't really matter if that purchasing power is coming from an actual physical Bitcoin, right? Bitcoins aren't physical, but you know what I mean by that. Or if it's coming from Rune, or it's coming from the reserve, or whatever. It doesn't actually matter. The question is whether or not can I redeem my synthetic Bitcoin for one actual real Bitcoin, right? And we're not doing any kind of fractional thing where it's just like, oh, we have 1,000 synthetic Bitcoins, but we only have purchasing power of 10 Bitcoins, and so now we're doing this fractional reserve thing that you're referring to. That's never the case. It's never fractional reserve. There's always much more collateral or much more purchasing power than the value of the synthetics by a good margin, by orders of magnitude, in fact. So
where does that come?
It comes from the pool, and it comes from the reserve. Because reserve, in fact, is the POL. So if you get to some crazy situation where the synthetic value is going up for some reason, right, and the Rune value is more or less staying the same, for example, and we've now gotten to a place where synthetic value is greater than the value of the pool, all that just means is that the POL just deploys more Rune until it gets to the point where that's no longer the case. Like the actual pool, like the amount of Rune in the actual in the POL, like deployed into the actual pool, doesn't really matter all that much. It's what's backing it is not just what it's deployed, but what it has to deploy as well. Do you know what I mean by that?
What happens when you reach the max amount of network deposit for POL? Do you look at the issue of being like essentially underwater on those synths, and you say, okay, well, all we need to do is just raise that. We need to keep raising this. We need to keep, essentially dripping more Rune into the pool. Then you just end up like Luna Foundation, where you're just selling your token to be able to acquire Bitcoin to backstop. You're just trying to you're trying to fill a hole. You're selling your token to buy an asset to fill a hole.
Okay, let me explain. That max POL thing you're talking about, the only reason why that exists is just to slow roll the release of the POL itself.
But at some point you run out of dry powder, right? At some point you run out of the ability to do that. It's not infinite.
Right. It's not infinite, but neither are the pools, right? If we didn't have the hard caps on the pools and people could deploy, $500 billion of Bitcoin into savers, then I'd totally be on your page. I'd be like, well, now we're in real trouble, right? But there are caps on these things, right? The value of the Rune in the reserve far outweighs than the value of the assets in the pool and the synthetic assets and all those things. Far outweighs, and it mathematically pretty much ensures that. I mean, technically, it's possible in some extreme scenario where like Rune's price goes down like 30x or something crazy like this, but like generally there are hard caps on these things to ensure that this doesn't go into some wavy, fractional reserve thing that you're freaking talking about. It has orders of magnitude. I think it's like 5 or 6x more available to it, right? Not to mention the reserves actually making money probably as part of this because it's owning 20% of the pool with a high leverage position. So it's just going to make a massive quantity of money, just part of the process. But like, so I don't really consider that to be like, at least in my view, people are welcome to disagree with me on this, but to be necessarily a large problem. Does that make sense to you or no?
Yeah, I just, okay, all right, we can move on. Let's talk about on the security side. Like, we recently floated the idea of increasing the number of bond providers for a node and then allowing anonymous node providers, essentially, so that like someone could bond into a node where they may not even necessarily like know that person. That was floated as like a potential way to allow people to stake rune, quote unquote, just if they don't have the minimum amount to run a node themselves. What did you think about that? I think there was some split opinion on that one.
I mean, I personally dislike it. We've always had the stance that allowing anonymous people to provide capital to anonymous people to secure the network is, to me, that's not secure.
What about if the node operators are like semi-docs? Like what if they're so quote unquote trusted entities within the Nine Realms ecosystem? What if THORSwap is running one? What if Nine Realms is running run? What if
why would we
ran one?
Why would we want to lean in the direction of trusted? Like, why are we going to introduce the idea of trust into the network all of a sudden?
Because I think what's going to happen is that like people don't need our permission to do this today, right? Like we can't prevent someone from spinning up like THORSwap from, for example, spinning up a DAO and saying, hey guys, we're just going to accept rune deposits and then we're going to put it into node for you guys and we're going to pay you out. So like it's like a kind of like a black market thing, right? Eric, so if we try to ban it from happening, people are just going to go underground with it, which that is a more trusted relationship than if you can do it at the protocol level where it's like non-custodial and people can just deposit into it, right? So I'm just kind of trying to think ahead. Like if the demand, if we see bond APYs go up to like 200%, somebody somewhere is going to be like, well, fuck, I'm going to leverage my reputation in this community. I have 200,000 Twitter followers. I'm just going to run a fucking node and accept, rune deposits from people and do it anyway. So like, I don't see how we can prevent that from happening once it becomes that lucrative.
Right, but we can't prevent people from doing that, and we can't prevent people from doxing themselves as nodes. All we can do is establish culture. Like I would publicly tell people, like, do not give your rune to some random person who says they're gonna, build a node with it. Nope.
People are gonna do it anyway.
I mean, if you want to do it, you can, and you might lose all your fucking rune. I can't stop people from taking risky actions, but to sponsor that from the protocol's perspective is I don't know, it's even worse from my perspective.
I think there's a steelman case to be made for increasing the amount of bond providers to 100 or so, and I think the reason for that is people. This is just like the argument for increasing the amount of bond providers. Obviously, like people want to know that the THORChain network is decentralized, and I think anyone that's been here long enough knows that it is pretty decentralized, and there's a lot of different node operators who have a lot of different interests and who all work together to make this network work. But I think like from an outside perspective of especially like people who are not currently in the network saying like, oh, you could start a Thor node, and obviously this is a trusted relationship thing where you need to know the identity of the people who are running the node or have some kind of recourse where if they did somehow do something to you or steal from you, you at least know who they are or have some kind of way to take action against them, or at least have not just be like, damn, they just stole all my money and I have no idea who they are or anything about them, right? But it does create obviously a lot more trust for the validators, but at the same time, it gives the opportunity for new validators to come up where they wouldn't in the first place, where there isn't that like initial capital to start the validator. So instead, you can get these community pooled validators where it might not have the same trust assumptions as like a completely anon validator set, but you would get that you would know that there's these groups of people that are running these validators that are obviously like separate from any other groups in the network. It just increases the perception of decentralization in the network. Just there being more node operators from different entities. Like I think that the THORSwap example is perfect. If they started running nodes as a DAO, had some kind of way to minimize trust there. Obviously, that is like the crux of the issue. I think just the amount of trust that you need to give to them with your rune. But there's plenty of businesses that exist like that like today already. So just not in THORChain yet. So I think that's a valid argument for wanting to increase to say like 100 or something. I think once you get into the realm of like thousands and Atom like Cosmos style, then it becomes kind of different. But I think that there's a valid argument to be made for the side of being able to spin up more bond providers. What do you guys think?
I mean, I would vote against it personally, if I was a voter. But also because, in part because the mechanism we are planned to scale the bond is not by allowing random people to bond with random people, which creates security risks and issues. Instead, it's the lending design to create a large quantity of buy and burn pressure on the rune asset to scale the rune price that scales the bond, which scales the security. Like that's the way to do it. Not so much to like, let's just like reduce the security of the network and just because we're greedy to get a deeper bond.
Do you think it actually reduces the security of the network? Wouldn't it just be the security of those individual people who are bonding to it? Because I think adding just new nodes to the network, even if they're doxed, does that actually decrease the security of the network itself?
Well, the problem is that like how many of these nodes you're talking about are run by one person versus different people who are or are not colluding with each other? So they like.
But can't people be given like the sort of latitude to like determine that? Like, right? Like it's like, okay, 9 realms run, we say we're running one, THORSwap is running one. Like now we've essentially opened up 1.8 million worth of like staking capacity for the community. Like I think that would make a lot of people really happy, right? A lot of THORchads would love to participate in that. And like we know that, THORSwap and 9 realms are likely gonna, keep their word when it comes to the fact that like how many we're running or whatever. I do see your point. Like there could be, some cabal of people who are running these like, they're all colluding together and they all have like all their alts on, crypto Twitter are each shilling their validators as being like separate, but they're really all like acting together and colluding. But like how many THORchads on the stage right now would actually just like, stake to someone who wasn't like a known community figure? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people are just going to stake to random validators.
Yeah. Like the way I see this more as is just being like, oh, Binance is running a Thor node and wants bonders. Obviously, like Binance has enough room to run their own Thor nodes or whatever. But I'm saying like Trust Wallet or Edge Wallet, like a better example, like a smaller wallet wants to run their own infrastructure, but they don't have the upfront capital to do that, so they could source it from the community. And right, and like obviously like there are these problems that come up with Chad's thing, but I'm just saying that like there's two ends of it here, where I think there's the negative end and there's the positive end of it.
Also, would it really be hidden if like let's say THORSwap did it and like you didn't know how many nodes they were running? Well, if I go to THORSwap interface and I deposit rune, like wouldn't you be able to track like, oh, that went to this node? I mean, so couldn't we like figure out how many a doxed operator is running?
You can send it to multiple addresses. Like each person has a different address, which goes to a different node, and you're operating multiple nodes. Like we've always said from the beginning that we want nodes to be anonymous. We don't want them to be doxed. We don't want them publicly talking about who they are, where they run their node geologically speaking. We don't want people to like have that ability, because all of a sudden I'm running a node, and I know that Pluto's running a node because he's part of Nine Realms, and I know Chad THOReau's running a node because he's part of THORSwap. I know FamiliarCow is doing it because blah 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 whatever. And then I start DMing all you people and saying, let's cause this whole thing to crash and or something like this. It's like some malicious kind of action.
Why would any of us do that?
Well, none of us
We're
would
all-
actually do it, obviously. I'm just saying that like
Yeah.
part of
It
the
relies on
protections
trust
of the,
at that point.
yeah, like I don't want anybody to trust that Pluto is cool and Pluto won't do something malicious. Or me, or Chad THOReau, or FamiliarCow. Like this whole thing is designed to be trustless from the get-go, and the idea of inserting trust for the first time in the protocol's history is, against everything that it stands for. At least for me, that's
So,
true.
so my question is, how is this different than like kind of what's already happening? Because like, there already are bond providers, and obviously that's limited to I think 5 or something like that. But it's already it's just a scale up of kind of the already what's kind of the business model of Nine Realms of having bond providers and then running infrastructure for others. So how do you guys
So
think about that particular thing? Because it's already kind of happening.
that's because in that bond provider scenario, you have to be doxxed between, or rather, the operator has to be doxxed. The provider doesn't necessarily have to be, but you have that ability to know who you're operating with, and then you have the ability to have legal repercussions on that person if they were to do something against the best interests or sign a contract that says they will not do X, Y, and Z or whatever. And you can't do that from an anonymous perspective, nor can you do it on some sort of large scale with like 100 different providers. You have to find like you and a couple of your friends to get together, run a node together, right? It doesn't really change much in that regard. But allowing anonymous people on the open protocol, I think, would be detrimental to its safety.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely get where you're coming from. Let's look at the other side of it. Like, think about if your trust wallet right now, and we told them like, hey, Nine Realms could run a node for you, and you can just have all your users stake by just sending a transaction with this memo to the bond module, and then they would immediately be earning single-sided rune yield through your app. You guys could take an affiliate on that or whatever. You guys like you can take a fee through like we figure that out, right? And then so now there's some agreement between like Trust Wallet and Nine Realms, like where we basically have signed a contract with them that says like we will not rug their users. So like there's essentially that same legal agreement that you said there, but basically on behalf of all the people that they're putting in the front door through their app, right? And so what that then does is that then creates it brings us closer to entities like trust, which I think that's obviously something that we want, is that more people in the ecosystem, more big players in the ecosystem are like it just means like THORChain and Rune is just gaining notoriety and it's gaining reputation. But then it encourages their users to actually buy Rune, right? They're going to want to say, hey, buy Rune and stake it to our node directly from within Trust Wallet, like on the Rune wallet page, right? Like you can see like how this just opens up new possibilities for new products, for stronger partnerships, for more capabilities for just the average THORChain user. So I think that, right? I think you get that, and that's just kind of the other side of this, right? But it's just at some point, right? Like we are constrained in how much we can scale this network on the bond side, and there are only going to be so many people that have the risk tolerance to hold 900,000 Rune, and for that really to be a major investment and a major thing for them. So I actually was asked this by a community member. I had a call with a community member the other day, and he was saying, like I have clients who they don't really they don't take a position if it's like less than 30 mil, 40 million, like big family offices wanting to get involved in nascent crypto, and your name came across our desk and blah 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 blah. I don't know how legit that is or not, but he's just basically saying like I've been looking at your guys's tokenomics and everything, and like the big thing I want to know is like how do you guys scale this from being like to basically being able to have like $1 billion in TVL? And so, I mean, like, let's go through those things real quick. And I think there's a number of things that we've talked about on this call, but let's just go through them all really quickly. So, Chad, to your point, like creating buy and burn pressure on the rune and price asset itself via lending increases the price, which increases the value of the already bonded rune. So that's like one way we could scale the network, right? We just talked about like increasing the number of bond providers, or rather decreasing the barriers to entry to becoming a node operator. That's another one that we just talked about. We also talked about being able to take a stake in protocol owned liquidity, like whether that's like, you know, some I personally like the idea of being able to like choose which pool you want to add, like you want to add a rune into. So that's, you know, definitely designed to explore. What else? What other ways can we, you know, and it can either be like allowing the network to scale, or just like allowing more people to participate, whatever that is. Can we think of any other ones?
So are you trying to think about ways we can scale the bond or ways we can scale the TVL?
Well, aren't those two sort of like interconnected? I mean,
There's a relationship between them.
Yeah.
Scale, but they're it's a very different procedure or process to scale one versus the other. A very different mentality. If that makes sense. So like I think at least for me, the solution to scaling the TVL to me is going to be savers, because there's a massive quantity of people who want to earn, you know, ETH on their ETH or BTC on their BTC. Like this is one of the most brilliant things about THORChain as a project that really doesn't get enough attention or credit, is that every other layer one in crypto is trying to beat every other layer one. Everybody's like being argumentative and combative, and it's a you know it's a zero sum game, and like Solana's trying to take out Ethereum, and AVAX is trying to take out Solana or whatever. Same thing with like layer twos, Arbitrum and Polygon, these kind of things. They're just like fighting these battles with each other. But what's so unique and different about THORChain is that it actually doesn't do that. It does the opposite of that. It's not trying to beat Ethereum or beat Bitcoin or beat anything else out there. It's just trying to contribute significant value to them. And so by pulling on that string as the methodology to scale the pools, by having them getting Bitcoin yield in their Bitcoin, or ETH yield in their ETH or whatever, or Dash or Doge or whatever it might be, like that can scale this thing so much farther. Like the market cap of all those tokens combined to the depth of the security of the network is like, was it like 10,000x? Like there's I mean, I think that's why I feel like we've basically solved the liquidity issue, and that will scale naturally with the network pretty easily. I think this is my 2 cents. This scaling the bond though is a very different beast. We've talked about scaling the bond on and off since the beginning.
It's your favorite subject, Chad.
It is a difficult subject. Like that one, like scaling the volume through integrations is relatively like easy. It's just about selling an obvious and easy, like and perfect product for Trust Wallet or whatever. Scaling the pools became easy once we actually understood the savers concept, right? And we still have the same problem of how we scale the bond, and that's a much more difficult and complex way to do so. And despite my best efforts and other people's best interests to figure a creative way to allow random people to bond randomly into the network, to be honest, I just never found a way to do it in a way that maintained economic security. So that's why we started to reach out to scale the network, the bond, not in terms of total of rune deposited to the bond, but scale on the other side of the candle, which is, you know, what can we do that creates buy pressure on the rune asset in significant ways, while also actually providing a really good and valuable service that is actually, you know, people are willing to use and pay money to use, rather than just like some Ponzi-nomic bullshit, you know, of minting to infinity or you know, promising some ridiculous yield that doesn't make any sense. And so I think we've done that with the lending design. And I think I think we should give that a try and see how it goes before we talk.
For sure.
Yep.
Well,
cool. Good discussion there, I think.
All right, whatever. Go ahead.
Sorry. If you have more to say on that, you can go.
No. It's fine. It's fine. I was just gonna start throwing out crazy ideas, but we can save that for another time.
We're at that point already?
Crazy ideas. I love crazy
no,
ideas.
no,
I love crazy
I
ideas.
like crazy ideas.
It's too close.
We're on
to the
Discord. No,
holidays.
you know, it's not Twitter this time. Like it's just Discord. We're good.
We're good. Yeah.
What if we get rid of the bond and we have Trump digital cards be the bonding
Yes.
asset instead of rune? What do you guys think?
Yes. Do it.
I was thinking this morning, what if there was only one rune and it was just fractional rune that was you just deposit like, you know,
No.
400,000 Tor.
What about this? All right, but actual crazy idea. All right, so what if? And so like I think, okay, imagine we like hit the security cap because it's so expensive to provide. But imagine like the collateralization ratio like is we're kind of just like running hot, right? Where we're just like, okay, we've written up a bunch of loans and we've got a bunch of that TVL due to savings and we've hit the security cap and we kind of just like run out of or potentially maybe what if we even like hit the throughput, right? Like what if we just are processing too many transactions and we can't extract any more fees so we're kind of just like stuck, right? What about have you given any thought to the idea of like sharding THORChain? So basically like ending up like essentially satellite networks where it's just like maybe it's just like 10 or 12 validators get together and decide to essentially put up all of the Bitcoin and Rune needed to just basically run like almost like we were talking about with vault nodes before, but it's just like one asset, one pool on its own sort of like side chain, and then it uses IBC to beam native Rune back and forth, and then you can just expand the TVL of like Bitcoin by essentially like depositing into the Bitcoin THORChain side chain. Is that crazy or would something like that work to basically if we found that like okay like 98% of the TVL is Bitcoin, we just like we want to become this Bitcoin liquidity black hole, and we want there to be more Bitcoin in THORChain than on all the sexes combined. It is how do we do that without like spinning up new networks that have like different security, essentially just like different security envelopes, right? Like is that possible? Are there things that we should just start doing research on now that we have a solution in place when we do hit that?
We actually did talk about this concept a long time ago. I actually was living in Australia for a little while, and in the earliest days of like the architecture and design of this network, and me and kind of like the early people, it would sit every day with a dry erase board and draw different ideas and concepts, and we would go to lunch together and just start throwing crazy ideas at each other all the time and trying to think of solutions to problems, which we eventually found, and that's what THORChain is today in some sense. But the reason why we kind of went against the notion of like multiple chains or multiple networks that could all kind of cohere into one large one in some sense or form is because first of all, the technical complexity of that would be significantly higher, right? To be able to communicate across multiple chains like that I think would just make the product even more ambitious, even more complex than it already is at the time. So it wasn't something I really wanted to take on in the earliest days, but also it creates like a little bit of a Frankenstein security model where the security of the Bitcoin is different than the security of the Doge, than the security of the Litecoin, and then that just becomes a difficult thing to reason about. Of like, what if I provide my Litecoin into this network? Like, what is the security model here, and why is it different than every other asset? And that just becomes another layer of complexity that the user has to comprehend, which is just as complex as the network already is. We didn't want to put even more complexity on top of all that, right? So for me, it's like it's probably just not worth the extra security, extra technical complexity to maintain and build that, and the bugs and possible exploits and all that kind of stuff. And it just made sense to keep it a more of a uniform structure that gives everything the same security, the same design, the same, more or less everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think it does open. There are some really novel designs that you could come up with. I mean, when you guys talked about that back in the day, did IBC exist?
No, IBC didn't exist until like a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was talked about. It was like something on paper, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason why we built Bifrost is because IPC didn't exist, and if it did, wouldn't be able to accomplish the things we needed to accomplish, like integrating with Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example. And
Yeah.
you know, to be honest, I was always very bullish on IBC. It wasn't until I actually started to like really get into the weeds of it and try to implement it on THORChain that I become more bearish on its design, just because I was really bullish on it, and I think we all were. I think you were there too. Like you and me and Gavin,
Yeah.
we were all like let's get IBC integrated. We were all like positive, and every time we tried to do so, there's some layer of stupidness that would just break everything, and we're just like none of this makes sense to us, and we just like kept on hitting our heads against the wall for months trying to figure out a way to make this thing actually work and still uphold the standards of security that we kind of put forth to begin with, and it's just too difficult, to be honest.
I'm just thinking because like we've been having, I don't know if I can say this, but we've been having conversations with like centralized exchanges who want to start using THORChain as their asset background, as their asset infrastructure, essentially to be able to have proof of reserves from day one with an integration, right? Just basically being able to outsource this whole problem, the whole headache of, whoa, we have, like proof of reserves and all this like auditing and all this. It's like, it's actually going to be easier in the future for sexes to just wrap dexes, which I think the THORChain Twitter account was alluding to this morning at some point. But anyway, like there's interest among centralized exchanges to wrap the THORChain infrastructure. And so I'm just wondering if like I just think that like the security is going to be tough if they're like, well, we have $1 billion in Bitcoin deposits. Like, how do we transition that over to your system as quickly as possible? Is there, I'm thinking about like, is there a way to do that allows them to leverage the technology of THORChain while not being like 1,000% within our system yet? So they still kind of like retain control over, like their design. But I was almost thinking like they can just run like a private validator set of their own THORChain sidechain, and then all they have to do is put up like 1-to-1 Bitcoin with Rune. So they buy a bunch of Rune, and then they basically can use that to extend the existing liquidity pools. I don't know. It's crazy, but
you're talking about like
I'm just trying
them like expanding, like having the public Bitcoin pool, but then and they append to it their own private liquidity that only they have access to. Is that what you mean?
something like that. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just the idea that like floating around is if is there a way to like take a centralized entity who will always be centralized, but allow them to somehow participate in the THORChain network while essentially contributing to the liquidity, but like so basically like they could be using THORChain for all of its like transparency benefits, but they would still be like their users would still be transacting with their Bitcoin pool, but just using THORChain and basically creating some incentive for them to like buy Rune or whatever to use it in their own private network or something. I don't know. That sounds stupid. Never mind.
I mean, I just got a message today from Kyle Samani over at Multicoin, and he was like asking something similar to this question of like, are there any centralized exchanges that are looking to, be the fiat on ramp, off ramp, but not do any of the actual like crypto trading, and then instead of all that just gets like pushed on to THORChain, right? So they only just carry dollars, and maybe they carry Bitcoin, or maybe it's stable, depending on how they want to structure it, and whenever somebody says, "Hey, here's some dollars, and I want Doge," it takes the dollars and it sells the Bitcoin that it has into THORChain, and then the Doge gets sent to the Doge address, whatever address that might be. And so like that is an interesting concept. But it's not really using its own private liquidity. It's actually just utilizing liquidity that already exists. They don't even necessarily have to have much for liquidity, other than just to like back the value of their dollars and their Bitcoin or whatever to interact. But I think that's a fascinating idea. Whether or not somebody will actually do it or not, I mean, it definitely won't be THORChain, but maybe Thor Wallet would do it. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Here's an interesting question from the thread. I wanted to get to this one. Yangu via Basic says, what are we going to do to scale stablecoin TVL further? Stablecoin will not be a part of savers, yet the depth of stablecoin pools will affect lending UX. What do we? Yeah. So when we get rid of impermanent loss protection too, there's really no incentive to do LP on stables. So unless you're like already grandfathered into ILP. So what do we do about stablecoin depth on THORChain? How do we scale that?
I mean, that's been a debate I've had with other people, other devs of like, should we allow savers for stables? And I've been personally kind of leaning against it, and other people have been leaning for it, and it's kind of a debated topic. It's not actually all that important that that the stable coins are deep. They don't have to be $100 million deep to work and do what they're designed to do. When you're actually getting out your loan, you're probably going to be getting out not like a 2-to-1 ratio, but like a 200% CR. You're probably something closer to 6, probably, I'm guessing. And so like if you put in a large quantity of money, swapping your Bitcoin to derived asset Bitcoin, that'd be your collateral. You're gonna take 1/8 of that or 1/6 of that or some number, whatever the hell it's gonna be, to get your stables. In which case the swap fees matter less because your debt is a lot less than your collateral. Yeah, I'm not terribly concerned about it personally, but if it actually does get so shallow that it becomes problematic, then we can talk about that. But there is a lot of drive for value into the savers already, just because arbitrage bots use stables as their kind of their settlement asset. So there's a lot of trading happening on the stables, more so than other assets relative to their depths. So I don't know. We'll see. We can adjust as we need to adjust, but I don't think it's a problem we're gonna need to solve personally.
On that, can you remind us just what's the main argument against stable savers?
The main argument that at least that I have is that we only have so much security in the network, right? So much room on the bond side to secure this network, and we want our pools to be deep, the ones that are actually going to be used, right? Because I think we've all kind of like acknowledged at this point that people aren't going to trade to USDC on THORChain for the most part because you can just do it via DEX aggregation and probably get a better price, right? And so why are we going to spend the time or spend the security, the security space, if you want to call it that, to make a pool deep that really isn't going to be used all that much, other than just being more or less a price oracle for the Tor asset, which is for the lending design, right? I'd rather have the pools, we have like the primary asset pools, the gas asset pools, to be as deep as possible, personally, rather than getting UCC to be $50 million deep or something like this.
I guess even with lending, the borrow asset could be using the aggregator, right? Like you could be technically borrowing ETH, but then it like uses aggregated liquidity to get you to USDC or something. So I guess the main concern is just the price oracle sort of concept, right? I mean, because in my mind, I would think you would want that to be deep, because it seems like if you can manipulate that, then you're kind of manipulating how lending is pricing itself. But then the question is like, how do you actually keep those pools deep if they're not really needed for swaps and all of that?
Well, the lending design, it has price manipulation protections built into it that is irrespective to the depth of the pools, right? It doesn't actually matter how deep the pool is, because it's measuring the price change that you're applying to a particular pool, not so much how much room you spent to do so, or that would be relative to pool depth, which would be problematic in terms of protection.
That's super lit. Like, I want to point out, I didn't know about that at first, and I was just kind of like gaming through it, and I was like, oh, this could be an easy way to attack the system.
Yeah.
And then Chad explained this to me, and then I realized like you can't do this on Ethereum. You can't do this on Aave. You can't. Chainlink can never do this. Like, no, like it's so sick. Like you can only do this on a Cosmos network, I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it's one of these things that's like again, like there's even if you wanted to replicate even if you decided like, oh wow, THORChain just came out with a really novel lending design, you would not be able to do it on Ethereum or any other EVM based chain, to my knowledge, which is crazy.
You have to remember that the pools are always manipulable, right? They're just liquidity pools. Anybody can trade any volume they want in any direction of any of the pools, right? And if your defense against manipulation is the pools are deep, therefore it's too expensive to attack, well, that becomes, just depends on how much the attacker has in terms of capital, right? If you have a wealthy enough attacker, they can spend $2 million on fees to push the Bitcoin price down or up, depending on which direction they're trying to go, and then open up a $10 million loan, whatever, where they receive $80 million in debt. I'm making up random numbers here, but like you can't rely on the pool depths themselves to be your protection, because they're always manipulable. You have to start with that assumption, because they are, right? So instead of relying on the depth of the pools to protect the network from manipulation, we use just plain out mathematical approach. So it doesn't really matter how the depths are. It's a question of how much percentage change of the price has been pushed in this pool for the last 30 minutes. And that's some number. And depending upon how large that number is how shallow the virtual depth of the derived asset pools are.
Okay, that's blowing my mind right now. Yeah, I'm trying to get my head around this. So even if the pool is shallow, if the price of that stablecoin has moved dramatically, that's what it's factoring in. Like it's almost like has like an anchor point, and it's not about the depth. It's about if it's off from what it was.
Yeah, it's looking at the price change, right, of the pool as a percentage, right? If the pool has gone up 10% or 80, let's say the pool has gone up 180% in price in the last 30 minutes, right? It's because obviously somebody's manipulating the price at that point, right? Like that would cause the virtual pool to become really, really shallow for the derived asset thing. But if it's just regular trading and it's like 10%, 20%, blah, 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 whatever, then it would be, fairly deep relative to the layer one asset, right? So it doesn't really matter if the pool is $1 million deep or $1 billion deep. The responsiveness that the virtual pool has is the same, right? And so even if you spent less money to create a manipulated situation, manipulate the price, and therefore make the pool very shallow, the virtual pool very shallow, well, then whatever amount of money that you then blast the lending design to either open or close your loan, depending on which angle you're going at it, you would pay so much in fees because the pool is so shallow that you would pay much more in fees than the cost you spent to manipulate the price. That's the theory, at least.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it ends up working in practice, because like I can visualize it, but it's I'm curious to see what it looks like when we actually start getting into testing for that. Probably in 2023, starting testing on lending in stage debt. Pluto.
Yeah, I actually want to do a thing where we launch the derived assets in like an offline mode, right, where you can't actually trade with it or do anything. But I just want to watch how the derived asset pool depths shift over time. Like give it like a week or two of just normal traffic and normal pools, and see if the virtual pools are staying deep and they're staying very deep in size and they're not really fluctuating very much, or is it becoming very shallow because of some trade volume happening that's non-malicious, that's just regular trade volume. And so I actually want to do some experimentation on that, because I've come up with a few different implementations of how we like measure the amount of effect that the layer one pool has, right? I have a few different design ideas or implementation ideas. And so I'm starting with the one that is the most conservative, the one that is the most protective, right? Which might be overly protective, which is the thing I'm concerned about at this point. But that's a real possibility, which is why I want to test out these derived virtual pool depths in production, and just to see how the depths change from block to block, and just kind of watch it for a while and see if it's behaving in a reasonable way, or if it's overly sensitive and it's become really shallow too fast, and it's basically destroys the ability for lending to exist because all the virtual pools are like really shallow all the time. That just becomes counterproductive. But I figure we start with the most conservative approach first, see how it kind of fares, and then adjust if we need to.
Yep, best way to do it, I think.
Yep.
Does anyone from the audience have questions? Want to come up on stage? Already been at this for like hour 40 already, so won't go too much longer. But if there's people who want to come up, now's probably the time to raise your hand. And
It's good conversation. I don't mind it when these things go along,
Yep.
just because a lot of times it's like really good conversation. Either myself and Pluto are having some discussion or debate about something. Just it's kind of fun to hear different sides of a view.
Shock Rocket,
Hey guys.
hey,
A question about getting sexes set up with savers. What that would take, what kind of timeline that would be, if that's being explored, stuff like that.
I mean, it's very easy to do. If a sex wanted to integrate with savers and provide Bitcoin or other assets, whatever, it's actually very easy to do. So all you have to do is just sign a Bitcoin transaction to enter or exit, and that's literally the only thing you have to do. So I can't imagine it being that difficult. I don't know if Pluto has a different viewpoint than me, but
Are there incentives for sexes to do that? I know there's, for the users, obviously, big incentive, and I know there's a lot of people out there that are on sexes that are even being fully aware of the risks of being on a centralized exchange. They're aware of what happened with FTX and all that kind of stuff. Still won't leave Kraken, for example. They want to stay on there, but would be thrilled. I've talked to them about it, about the concepts of lending and saving. They're thrilled with that idea, but still don't want to leave centralized exchange. They don't want to leave Kraken, just because of, one, the work, setting up a new wallet, the risk of making that transaction, keeping track of keys, et cetera, and the risks involved with that. But if they had I can just get in my app or the exchange, one click, boom, I'm saving, or one click, boom, I'm lending, they'd be all for it. And I think there's probably a pretty big audience out there that would be in that same boat.
yeah. So as a centralized exchange, you really kind of two benefits or two reasons why you'd want to integrate with Savers. One is Savers supports affiliate fees, and so with every dollar you get put into Savers, the affiliate or the SEX itself can earn some kind of yield or income, which is incentive for them to do so. The other reason why they would want to do that is by being able to publish to people about like, oh, you can trade Bitcoin here, and also you can get Bitcoin yield. That just draws more capital and revenue into their system, where they can then build their business in a literal sense. And so there's multiple incentives for them to do so, and I think it's a natural thing to happen that we'll see a lot of this being used. I mean, like if like take Nexo. I don't know how much it is now because it's in bear market, but like back when last time I was talking to them, it was like 10 or 15 billion dollars of of crypto or value or whatever, and they're constantly looking for ways to generate revenue or ways to generate yield, because they get a lot of business from promising customers like, hey, give us your Ethereum, give us your Bitcoin, and we'll reinvest it for you, and we'll find ways to generate yield, and we'll give you some sort of yield product, and you don't have to worry about the mechanics of all that thing, or like study different Aave and different products and different DeFi protocols and blah, 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 GBDC and all these things. We'll just take it, abstract it away for you. We'll do the research, we'll do the legwork, and you just can sit home and get your yield. And so they're constantly looking for ways of getting yield. And in the right before the market went bear, we had a lot of those entities, such as exchanges like Nexo and BlockFi, and a lot of these services were like very bullish on adding LP to THORChain and all these other ideas. And then the market went bear. A lot of them went out of business. Blah blah blah, whatever. But like, there's definitely the drive is there, the demand is there. I think the product that we have will satisfy a lot of those companies and will naturally make the pools much more deep for THORChain.
That just gave me a crazy idea too. Is so the sex, yeah, they obviously have the opportunity to earn an income off of this through the affiliate fee. And hypothetically, like, what if they imposed a lockup period and they're taking a fee in exchange for that? What they're doing is fronting the cost of slippage, and that would be hypothetically really interesting because then the user on a sex in a really simplified environment, they would just deposit 1 Bitcoin and their balance would be 1 Bitcoin, rather than having to have the complexity of understanding like the in and out fees. It just makes me wonder if there's like a way to kind of like have that come from the sex income on the savers to kind of cover that cost for the saver, and then just simplify it for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Like,
could definitely do that with certain amounts. I think that'd be interesting, especially for tiers and things like that. You know, you could easily work out the math there for how long it takes to, like on average, to get the feedback for a certain deposit amount. I think that's a great idea. It's something that sexes should definitely look into implementing.
yeah, I think they naturally will. It's kind of a no-brainer in some ways. As long as they get, I mean, if we learn anything from FTX, they get permission from their users and they have our knowledge that they're that they're taking people's Bitcoin and putting it into THORChain savers. Like, obviously they can't do that without informing their users. I guess that's called fraud. But yeah, if they tell a user like, we're going to provide your Bitcoin into this network, into THORChain to savers, and earn you a yield, and that's great. And then you're right, then they can abstract away the fees that are associated with it and just just make them disappear for the users and make it even simpler for them.
Yeah, I think that'd be super cool because, like, I mean, obviously, I think Savers is amazing, but that's like one of the things that requires you to be a little bit more understanding, like what's actually going on, right? Because you have to understand slippage on the in and out, and if that could be abstracted away, then it's just like the simplest thing ever, right? So it'd be really cool.
You could just make it so that way you can't withdraw it until the user has recouped their original position, or you could have your own, like the sex could have their own position in it, and then user allocation just kind of comes out of that allocation. Like there's a million different ways you could do it, each with like different levels of risk that come with that, I think. But like,
yeah,
there's a lot of different ways to abstract that from the user and make it like a better UX.
And sexes take huge fees on those types of things typically, because there'll be like some L1 that like the staking is 9% or something, and if you deposit on it like through the sex, it's like 3% or something, right? So like they have a ton of margin there, and then if they could use that margin to just offset all the in and out fees, yeah,
they could totally do that, and they probably will. I mean, they'll probably gouge people. To your point, THOReau, like, we're right now it's like we're like a 5% yield on Bitcoin right now, and they'll promise people like 1%, and it'll be like 1,000 times more successful than BlockFi ever was, which is almost comical. But yeah, absolutely. Order. You got any questions?
Yeah, I do. So I guess a year or so ago, I floated the idea of why couldn't we use some of the liquidity to run validators to kind of juice the yields? And I think the answer I got back then was churn is a problem. And I wonder if that's still kind of the case, or whether we think there's.
Are you saying using LP units as your bonding asset instead of Rune?
Liquidity. So using, let's take like BSC is supposed to come online, right? So rather than just having BSC sitting there waiting to get swapped, that if the pools are deep enough, maybe take 25%, and maybe there's some more rules around this about like users depositing and locking it up for a certain period of time, but using that to run a BSC validator and take the yield from that validator and putting it back into the pool.
Well, that would require centralization for the first thing, because somebody has to actually run it. Somebody has to be selected to run that thing. And it also would require people's understanding and knowledge that a certain percentage of their LP position is going to be allocated for this purpose.
I guess the idea is, I mean, there would be, I don't know if it's worth it, but I guess my thinking is that, hey, there's capital, can it be used? Again, like I don't know the mechanics of like how deep into the pools do you go at any one time? But I don't think it's that deep. Could someone say, yeah, I'll agree to like keep my capital locked up for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month in exchange for a little extra yield because it's actually being used rather than just sitting there, being used to I guess, underscore or underpin a validator. BSC, ETH, any proof of stake or delegated proof of stake.
Yeah, I mean, this to me feels like an overcomplication, and you're also introducing a significant amount of risk because you require centralized entities to be part of it, as well as you are now having external dependencies on the THORChain network, which we've never done that before either, and for good reason, I might add. I mean, if somebody wanted to fork THORChain and effectively do what you're saying, that'd be an interesting, play, and we'll see how it works out.
This actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was just like, hey, can we make dual use of capital that's sitting there, and is it worth it?
This reminds me of an idea that was coming up when THOReau was integrated. I remember some people were pushing for, I think it was called X Luna to be a pool, and because X Luna was basically like a staked representation of Luna, and similar even for like the Atom pool. Like one reason that THORChain Atom liquidity isn't as deep as it could be is because people want the yield they can get and the airdrops they can get elsewhere with the Atom. So it's like an interesting concept. I think it does add like another layer of risks because then you're dealing with not really the true native asset, but some other asset. But maybe a fork is the way to go for that. Like a THORChain of yield bearing assets. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a weird fixation that the crypto community in general has around like double dipping assets, and the idea that I can take an asset and then get a yield in an asset and then take some derivative of that asset to get another yield in an asset and then do it again a third or fourth time. It's just like that, it to me feels fundamentally broken, and that you can't just take $100 and get yield on a $5,000 just because, whatever. I mean, you can, that's called leverage and people do that, but that just to me feels like, I don't know, way too risky.
It's the elephant meme. Do you remember the elephant meme?
No, which one's that?
I'll have to send it to you. I'm sure somebody remembers it.
Yeah, somebody shoot me a link to that elephant meme because I'd be curious about it. But like I've had friends who did this, like I got a good friend of mine who's like kind of a degen, and he kind of like does a lot of like crypto style gambling kind of thing. And he just like puts himself through so many loops of like risk to get some crazy high yield on some crazy asset or whatever, that he just ends up wrecking himself oftentimes. Like he just gets exposed to so many DeFi protocols. It's only a matter of time before one of them is just like emptied, because that's a common thing to happen in crypto in general, right? Is DeFi products become emptied.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I feel this is slightly less risky because you're running like an L1 validator, like for Ethereum. Like
yeah, that's true. Like that's not gonna collapse in a sense outside the context of that person who actually runs the validator decides to yoink and run away.
Yeah, it feels like as long as it's the asset secured, like the node operator can't run away with it without paying a price. I don't know. It feels like there's something there, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, as long as it does not make a compromise on security and like all these kind of things, which it sounds like it would. It require trust. It would create new points of centralization. It would require like deals being made between, I don't even know who's making this. Is it some sort of DAO or the validators electing HODR to be the validator for Binance Smart Chain or Atom or whatever the thing is?
Well, I'm just node operators are running nodes anyway, right? It would just be about adding a bond, an ETH bond. I don't know the details of ETH.
Yeah.
But adding actual ETH to that and saying, hey, go run this anyway. You're going to do it, and then when funds migrate the funds to the new address, establish a new validator, get pulled in.
Yeah. I just feel that stuff gets very unstable very quickly. Like Osmosis does something similar to that, where they have this like super fluid staking, which they're quite proud of as a community. But like to me, just the whole concept is just like void of any rationale Like the idea that I can provide bond and then get a yield on that, even though I'm not providing any value or service because I'm a delegate, and then get something else to be able to provide something to something else to get more yield on that. It's just like the elephant meme that Chad Thoreau sent me. It feels like that. Just an elephant sucking its own dick with its own trunk. It's
What?
just. He sent me the link. The meme is it's a blue elephant with his trunk going between his legs and sucking his own dick. That's what the meme is, right? Let's be adults here. Come on, people. Let's be adults here. Come on.
It's perpetual money machine.
It's a perpetual money machine of just like an elephant sucking its own dick, which you can't. You have to remember that, like, in order for you to make money, to make a yield, you cannot do it from sucking your own dick. Okay, it doesn't work that way. You have to get somebody else to inject something of value into your system. If there's no money, if there's no exogenous capital, there's no yield to be made.
Yeah. Everyone needs to realize that any staking design that basically just allows you to just stake somewhere and to receive some yield on it, it is literally just saying let's take tokens out of the circulating supply, lock them up, and then so there's less of a circulating supply, so that it looks like the market cap is lower, so more people buy the tokens, so that I as the founder of this project can go dump on all those idiots who staked early on. That's literally all staking is.
Yeah, that's the reason why it exists, is because it gives everybody a warm, fuzzy feeling that they're getting a yield on their Atom tokens or whatever it might be. In reality, it's just like everybody's just licking their own nutsack and not even realizing it.
Gavin, I swear, I promise.
Well said.
This whole call has not been like this. I see.
Popped in at the best time.
No comment. Just
no.
This one has been a little bit more unhinged because we it's like, screw it. These are all the Discord OGs, so we're just gonna kind of like YOLO some crazy ideas out on this call. But yeah, this has been a fun one.
No, we're talking about elephants and fellatio here, Gavin. It's a very serious topic, okay? We're having a very serious conversation.
No comment.
Where's HR when you need HR? THOReau, where's HR?
Is there a THORChain HR department?
Well, maybe there should be with my mouth.
Yeah, Chad, the last Discord stage, I don't think I told you this, but I think the fuck counter was at 88 for the last Discord stage, the one on lending.
I should hold back more than I do.
I actually have to censor
we love
the transcripts to be uploaded because Pastebin does not like profanity, so I have to
Really?
manually go in and take out all of your curses. Yep.
I'm sorry I make your life so difficult, Kyle.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, but in all seriousness, I gotta hop to another call. But just it was a really productive call today. We discussed a lot of topics. Obviously, the Trust Wallet integration was huge. We talked about synths. We talked about removing ILP. We talked about lending. We threw around some ideas about how increasing bond providers. We talked about being able to stake to POL. So yeah, a lot of interesting ideas. A lot of really great things. I'm obviously just regurgitating alpha here because my boss is on stage and year-end reviews are coming up. So great job, everyone. Great job.
It wasn't all elephant fellatio. It was other topics as well as Pluto was lining up for himself.
All right, guys. This is fun. I gotta jump now. But
All right, see you, Pluto.
See you, Pluto.
Yeah, so next week we should have that guy.
We can talk about year-end reviews.
I don't like that Pluto guy, man. He shouldn't get bonuses at all. I'm telling you right now, that Pluto guy.
Pluto was talking about elephants for like 2 hours almost.
I know, the whole time. Always talking about just elephant fellatios.
So next week we should have that guy THOReau. I should have pronounced his last name before I tried to say it live right there. But THOReau from Scroll.io should be on next week. The guy who we were talking to yesterday in conjunction with the Solana person. So they should be on next week. Maybe we'll have a interesting conversation about that on the spaces next week. And the week after that is like right between the holidays. So I think we're going to probably take that week off for spaces. But yeah, next week we should have something interesting. Some people from the outside of THORChain probably like coming in and, us talking about the core design a little bit more.
Yeah, I look forward to that one.
Should be a fun one.
Yeah,
I
it'll
know
be
I know the invite was extended to Anatoly, the co-founder of Solana. We'll see if he actually takes the
He
bait on
won't.
that or not.
He won't. He won't take the bait on that one.
Yeah,
He knows.
he's not coming. There's no way.
He knows not to stand in front of an audience of another chain and start shitting on it. He knows enough not to do that. Especially when
Brian
his
Pellegrino didn't know
arguments are
that.
so weak. Well, Brian is Brian. Brian is, I guess, in some sense, he's new to the space in some way. Like he's a new
That's true.
leader in a sense. Anatoly understands. Like he's had.
Does anyone else hear this? Or
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you went robot voice there. Maybe just repeat the last 10 seconds.
Oh, sorry about that. Like Anatoly's been around for a while. He's been a part of a project that's had big ups and big downs, and like he's been burned just from the process of running a network like this. And those of us who have done it know how he feels, and it's no fun sometimes. And so like he knows not to like throw shade and shit on other people for the most part. Even in this case of what he was saying on Twitter, like his argument was just like this weird thing of like, well, if all the computers are exploited, then all the money is lost. I'm like, well, yeah, it's true with like every computer system on the fucking planet. Like if I break into your house and steal your shit, like, yeah, that's okay.
you're broke.
You're broke, man. Like I was like, oh, but your house isn't secure because if somebody breaks into your house and can steal everything, then you lose everything. It's like, well, yeah, that's how houses work.
Yeah, if there's a bank vault with 20 different doors and you have all 20 keys and the guard is sleeping, can you get up with all the money?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Basically how it went. Yeah, I was like, if I have your Solana keys, Anatoly, then I have your Solana, right?
Yeah. And he was saying as well, you can't sign transactions because blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, dude, it doesn't even matter. Like, I can still, if I have all the Solana keys, I can move Sol from Chad THOReau's wallet into mine without requiring his signature. I can do what the hell I want. It's my network now. I can literally change. I am God. I have God mode here. I can go full goblin mode on this chain and do any of the things I want to do that I can imagine, because I can deploy any changes to the network that I want to deploy. So it's just like, it's a silly argument. And I think at some level he knows that, and he knows not to stand in front of an audience of people and stand by a silly argument. So,
well, I think his point is just like nothing is infallible, and like if there is like a remote code execution like exploit and all the validators, like that is a huge concern. But like obviously like that's the case for any network, like literally any network, right? So,
and that's one of the things I tweeted to him. I said like no system is perfect, and THORChain is by far the best we have. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, so I doubt there's any way that he comes on, but we are trying, and it would be great. I do think it was kind of weird that they put that in the Blockworks coverage from yesterday, but I think that's just part of the topical style of
more
reporting
clicks.
Nowadays.
Yeah, just more clicks, more downloads, or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of. I do feel kind of bad about that because it does feel like at this point it's like, oh yeah, it feels like we kind of baited him into that, but it's his own fault, so he's got to live with that.
Yeah.
He started it.
I didn't think I had no intention of making it into the article with that.
Yeah, it sucks. Like if you're like a high profile person like CZ, for example, you can't just say whatever you want because people literally look at every single one of your tweets and like analyze it and think all these things about it. Like it's got to be an incredibly tough position being like so visible, especially as like that the founder of like a huge like retail network like that, where there's like all these people like constantly looking at you. When you're in the zeitgeist like that, I'm sure it's a very different game. So
yeah, I remember Andre Konje said the same thing, where like he built a Twitter account that was super popular, had like lots of followers, like very quickly, very fast, and he was saying how much he hated it after a while, just because like every time he said something about some project, no matter like what it was said, like people would jump all over him or misconstrue his statements or whatever, this kind of thing. So it's like the more powerful you get in the Twitter sphere and the more followers you have, is like the more respect you have to have for that power.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to like also be practicing too, because as we get pushed more into like the central zeitgeist, which is kind of which is the way that things are trending and moving. Like we need to be more careful about that, especially like bandwagoning and things like that. Like, I mean, I do this all the time where it's like if someone mentions something about like, oh, where can I swap like these two things or whatever, and then retweet, and all the Thor chats come on, right? And it is kind of it is bandwagoning at some point. So it's like just balancing that, making sure that like we're not you know taking our like position in that zeitgeist like too seriously or anything, or actually taking it more seriously and just being respectful towards everybody is just important, because at some point people do like pick up on your every move, and if
Right.
when we get to that point, we just got to be careful about it.
Yeah, and also when somebody doesn't understand the importance of THORChain, instead of just kicking them in the balls, take that as an opportunity to explain it and educate them. And sometimes stuff on Twitter can seem like somebody's talking shit or fudding, and they're actually just confused or unaware. So a lot of those are opportunities to get new Thor chads.
That's true. It's true. All right. Anything else, guys?
I think
Yeah,
we're good. That was
let's
a
wrap it
great
up.
conversation.
All right, guys. Thanks for jumping on. Talk to you next week.
Sweet. See you next week. Bye bye.
See you guys.